Namaste. I hope you enjoyed our last video, which was on Acharya Chanakya and human psychology. This is the second installment in the series. Have you thought about this? Whether it is sport, whether it is war, or whether it is business, the victory first happens in the mind and then in reality. You've heard this, but you don't really believe it, isn't it? I'm going to share more on the wisdom of this. But before that, let me ask you, do you know that story about the real incident, real story about how finally Andre Agassi was able to overcome his, great adversary of that time, Boris Becker? If you don't know, you must study this more deeply. But for now, I can tell you that having continuously studied Boris Becker, he realized that the most powerful part of Becker's game, where he was at the receiving end and losing out, was the service. And the more he focused on Becker during his service, he realized that Becker had a strange habit of just flicking out his tongue at the moment when he was serving. And the big booming serve and its observation revealed something really new to Andre Agassi, and that was that the tongue, its direction indicated which way was the ball going to be served. Isn't that amazing? Now, when he figured that out, he had an advantage because he knew which direction he has to jump in to counter that serve. And that gave him the advantage which he didn't have until now, and the tide began to turn. In fact, Andre Agassi even confirms that just to make sure that I am not found out about this being found out, I had to ensure that many a times I intentionally lost the point. In other words, in both the cases, he was playing with the mind. Both his own, gaining a mental victory first, and then with that of the others. Therefore, last time I mentioned this quote, which all the greats have stated, but just to kind of repeat, Sun Tzu in The Art of War has stated something very important. He said, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the outcomes of 1,000 battles. In other words, you will probably win them all. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every war that you win, you will lose one. And if by chance you neither know the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle that you fight. You will lose. So powerful, right? Similarly, Acharya Chanakya has a sutra which says, he says that Atmavan is the king. Atmavan tva alpo deshaha yuktaha prakruti sampada. Yuktaha prakruti sampada. Nayadnyaha pruthivi krutsnam jayatyeva na hiyati. In other words, Atmavan is the one referring to the king, but who knows himself. The king who knows himself, doesn't matter even if the kingdom is very small, alpa desho. Doesn't matter, he says. But his rest of the kingdom and his ecosystem, he knows very well. The ecosystem includes the adversary. He knows that very well. He says that it doesn't matter whether the kingdom is small or large. Jayatyeva, he will win and not lose, not declare. Now, what is it that one needs to know about oneself and the adversary? Right? You must be curious. So, let's look at two quick steps which Acharya has given us. I'm adapting it for you to note more about yourself. It is said that who we are gets reflected in others. Yes, who we are gets reflected in us. Which means that I must look for what I do to others or what I see in others when I'm interacting with them. So here are 2 steps for you to observe. Every time I speak, start looking at the impact that you have on each one of them. Start studying whether their face changes, you notice some gestures of anxiety or restlessness, or are they engaged, are they interested, are they absorbed, are they waiting to hear more? Start watching this. It is telling you about yourself. Secondly, whatever you do to them, the behavior that you have with them. Again, see if you notice any impact, start studying. For example, if you have told a certain friend that you would keep a commitment and you are able to keep that commitment, notice how that friend, or for that matter, anyone in your ecosystem, starts responding to you. You may just find that the response is actually far more proactive than it was earlier. I want you to start studying this closely. This is how you will know more about yourself. More on that the next time. Now, if you want to know which are the books from which you can study more about human psychology, of course you will need a little help. Here they are. This was the first book that I quoted. So this Art of War, very popular, right? Another book, which is a Chinese classic. It's called The Book of 5 Rings. And this is one of the books that are quoted by military strategists all around the world. But not to be left behind is our very own Kautilya Arthashastra. Now this is the most difficult to read, but nevertheless you can start getting curious about it and finding out. All the best to you. More in our series next time, but please perform these experiments rigorously as I mentioned. Dhanyavad.